Welcome to What is Black podcast, where we have conversations to help parents guide their children through the positive and negative narratives of being Black. I'm your host, Dr. Jacqueline Duget, a pediatrician and mother of two, and I'm so glad that you've joined us today. On this episode, we speak with Tembi Locke, the author of the debut novel From Scratch, a memoir of love, Sicily and Finding Home. So let's get started with the show. Welcome, everyone. I am honored to have as our guest today, Tembi Locke. Tembi Locke is an actor, writer, and advocate, and the author of a wonderful new book, From Scratch, a memoir of love, Sicily and Finding Home. Welcome, Tembi, to the show.
Hello, welcome. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Like I said, it's an honor to speak with you. And when I first received the book, I was like, okay, this is a gift, right? Literally and figuratively. I loved reading the book, and last night as I was talking to my husband, again reminding him like, oh yeah, I'm excited because I get to speak with Tembi today.
Oh.
That as I read the book, for me it sort of played out as a movie. I know it's your real life, but I told him, I said, you know what, I could see this as a movie because I think what is so grounding about the book is your honesty and how you speak. Beautiful prose as well. And I just loved the rawness of it and the intimacy of the book. But before we go any further, give you the opportunity to share with our listeners anything you'd like to share with them before we get started with the conversation.
Well, thank you for that beautiful introduction. One of the things that I really try to do, I am a first-time writer. I'm an actor. I've been an actor for, more than 20 years. And, I also do advocacy work around caregiving and particularly family caregivers. But this is the first time writing a book, and I really wanted to, with all of my heart, be as authentic and as open and to a large degree vulnerable as possible on the page. So it really means a lot to me that spoke to your heart and that you had that experience reading it. It's just incredible to hear that back. So
share with us a little bit. Give us an overview of your new book, From Scratch.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for asking. So From Scratch is a cross-cultural love story that is set largely in Sicily, and it has interlacing themes of family and food and motherhood and loss and forgiveness, and it traces the first 3 summers that my daughter and I spent on the island of Sicily with my mother-in-law after my husband has passed away. My husband was an Italian chef, and after his passing, there's a way in which I feel compelled to bring my daughter to Sicily each summer to sort of heal and repair a relationship with my mother-in-law. So it becomes an intergenerational look at 3 women, young girl and a grandmother and a mother, all trying to find their way across language and race and culture and geography and form a new relationship. And there's great food.
Thank you for sharing the book, and again, you share a lot of personal details, that I think resonate with a lot of people. And like I mentioned before the interview, I think for me, the one thing that resonated was your role as a caregiver. And
yes.
I think for me, that role was so important because it sort of harkened back to a memory that I had. So I'm a pediatrician by training, and when I was in medical school, one of the rotations that I did was on a neurology unit. And so I'm not going to get all the details correct, but I think the one thing that struck me was this couple, and the caregiver, right? And they talked about how the caregiver, having to bathe the partner, the spouse. And yes. I think at that time I was just newly married, and I think the one thing that struck me was, could I do this, right? That's yes. love to me. That sort yes. of, not just sacrifice. So I wanted to talk with you about how that role as caregiver got you to learn the meaning of love.
Oh, wow, that's a wonderful question. And the two, I do believe, are very intertwined, although when I began my journey as a caregiver, and I use the term journey specifically because I was a caregiver for 10 years, and over the course of being a primary caregiver for 10 years, my husband, I should back up and say, was diagnosed with cancer, which is, I touch on, obviously, it's in the book, although initially it's funny, I thought I was actually going to write a book about caregiving, which, From Scratch is not a book exclusively about caregiving, but that's such an integral part of my story that it's certainly included. But when I began, my journey as a caregiver, I did not know, there was no template in my life for what was about to unfold, not in my, direct lived experience. I'd seen my grandmother be a primary caregiver to my grandfather and to her own mom, but I was a child during that time in my life. So I was 31 and my husband was diagnosed with cancer and our life flipped upside down. And we began this path, and I talk about in the book, and I've also given a TEDx talk on this, I talk about how in my giving to him in the role as caregiver, I received these untold, unimaginable gifts that I didn't know could be available to me. And our marriage deepened. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't something that it was a trial by fire to a large degree. But what I came to and what we came to as a couple, and me even after his passing, to know is that it is one of the most intimate and honoring and deeply connected human experiences that you can have. And it's odd to say that my life feels blessed for having been his caregiver, because I would obviously, none of us asked for a cancer diagnosis, but if that is what life gave us, the fact that through that experience, I could find deeper meaning not only in my marriage and as a mother and as a sister and friend, and even in my own understanding of my own capacity, that I could, on the other side of my 10 years as a caregiver, feel that I've been given gifts was something I never could have imagined day one. Never.
Wow. And, I reflect personally as well that I've seen my mom-in-law and I've seen other family members go through the process. My father-in-law passed away of cancer a few years ago, and I had a sister-in-law who passed away from cancer. And again, it's like that. There was just something about witnessing the not just sacrifice, but for me, it's love, right? To me, that sacrifice equals love. To see the process of, and the strength and the honoring of that person that life lived, that was so beautiful to me. And I think you did like a great job in the book doing that, because I think for me, and again, when I liken it back to, like I would love to see this as a movie, is that I think I rarely see couples go through like these difficult times, but not just difficulty, right? But there's also a triumph that you don't typically see in most stories. And I think that, I think that's what you do well.
Oh, thank you. And I do want to say, because I do feel that so many, particularly women, I mean, there are, I think the statistics are up to like 70 million, people, largely women, are primary caregivers right now as we speak, as they hold down full-time jobs, as they care for their own children or parents. And so there are a lot of people doing this right now. And I think that it's, sometimes it's easy to say that, oh, that person's just so incredibly strong, or that person's just, incredibly resilient. And there's truth in that. However, what I would say in my experience and what I've observed is often the strength of the caregiver comes from, one, the love that they have for the person for whom they're caring, but also comes from the community of everyone around them who are supporting them up. It's the friends who are saying, you can do this. How can I help you do this? I mean, I got so much strength from my immediate family, my parents, my siblings, but also from my community of friends who kind of held me up so that I could hold him up. So it then became a kind of, almost a matrix of love, this interlacing of all of these different energies seeking to sort of help one person. And that is love in a big way.
And I love that term, that matrix of love. I was going to try to find, there's one quote, I think I got it on the right page, on 295, where...
Oh, I love that you have the book.
Yes, I have the book in front of me. There's a quote on the bottom on page 295 when you're with your mom-in-law, and the paragraph says, she nodded in response. The air about us was full of what wasn't said. She was in her own way telling me I was known and loved, that wherever my life might take me, there was a love that was unshakable. And I was like, oh my God, like, again, to me, that's a reflection of your writing, but also to, I think, what you spoke to, this matrix of love, right? That, and again, I'm not going to give away the whole story, but how, you grew as a family, right? Your extended family, like you said.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I have to say that all of us, I mean, to say it plainly, we all upped our game. We upped our game in every way. And that is the way we, sort of all greeted or met this life-changing diagnosis. It asked each of us to bump up the ways in which we chose to engage and to be with each other and to love each other. And that doesn't always happen, but one of the things with people, with families, but one of the things that I hope is an outcome of the book, that for some people who read it, they may see the possibility of that, and it may change that experience for them. It may just invite a little more love in, a little more connection in, a little more patience and understanding and empathy.
And I agree with you. I mean, again, just personally, because I mean, you could do a couple of things. I think when you see someone going through it, like a caregiver, right? You can be hands off and like, well, I don't know what to do, so I'm just not going to do anything. Or you can lean into the situation. So I mean, everyone has a choice, right? And everyone has to be where they are at that time. But I feel like, I think the example of you and Sorrow, your husband, sort of provided that template or that scaffolding for your family, then sort of kind of like affix to and create that home, create that matrix.
Yeah, thank you. And the book opens as a straight up love story. I mean, it is a love story, and it's in the full sense, both romantic love, but also this sort of bigger love that we're talking about. And some of that was the guy that I write about in the book. I mean, he's a central character in the book, and how his incredible capacity for love, which is something that he would laugh at if he heard me say that today, because he didn't think of himself in that way. He just thought, well, this is just how I am. But he kind of inducted people into their open heart. He kind of asked that of people, and people were a little, people smiled a little bit more when they were around him. They laughed a little bit more. He was sort of easygoing, and so when I sat down to write about our life, my life our life together, and my life, as it changes and unfolds and is reimagined after his passing, bringing him into the room and letting the reader really get a sense of who he was really important to me, because I felt he was the anchoring of the whole story.
And so I think that's a nice segue.
Good.
Because I think the one thing too that was really interesting for me throughout the book, like food was a big character as well. I think as part of the story, and Sorrow being a chef. As I read this, I'm like, oh man, I love Italy. I had the opportunity to visit Italy with my, northern Italy though, with my son a few years ago because he plays soccer, and it's like, okay, this is like once in a lifetime opportunity.
Yeah, you have to go.
Yes, it was wonderful, and I just wanted to read a quote again, read a passage from the book to me that sort of sums up the importance of food throughout the book. So on page 299. For those who will get the book after they read this, they hear this episode, you write, the food from Nona's kitchen told a story, an epic and personal story of an island and a family. It told the story of poverty, grief, love, and joy. It spoke forthrightly of people who had at times survived on bread, cheese, and olives while foraging wild vegetables from the rich orchards dotting the foothills near her house. And to me that was like such a you painted again such a beautiful picture of how important food is to family, and I wanted to hear from you. Why was that so important? And the memory of the flood. What did those memories of food bring up for you as you wrote the book, or how did it infuse your writing of the book?
Well, I mean, I spent 20 years married to a chef, an Italian chef, so food sort of sits at the forefront of how I think about the world, how I move through the world. It's like if you were married to a musician, you hear sounds everywhere, right? If you're married to an architect, you look at structures, physical structure, in the world in a different way. So being married to a chef, food is really at the epicenter. Not only it's something that I do because I do eat 3 times a day. I do believe in that. So it's not only a ritual, right? But also it is connected so much to my understanding of love. I mean, he used food as an expression of love, right? And so when I began to write the book, and actually in the first, I write in the book about the first months after his passing, how literally hard it was just to walk into the kitchen, how difficult it was to eat. The most basic human need was really hard for me to fulfill. And so I was longing for, in my grief, for both him physically, but also the kind of food as a love letter from him, and I wanted, and my palate actually at almost like a physiological level felt like it had just gone dead. Also, I couldn't taste anything. So there was something about the confluence of that the deep experience around food that I knew if I could express that on the page in the book, I might be able to give the reader a sense of what that kind of deep grief felt like. And of course, and as we, follow in the book, I make that first trip to Sicily, to his hometown, to his homeland, and the way I began to sort of come alive slowly again, right, incrementally. And a lot of that happened at the table with my mother-in-law, and the way that Sicilians use food to mend fences, to heal, to, make peace, to show love. And, I'm at the table of my mother-in-law, and the way that she would feed us as both, a sort of wish for our wellness as well as an expression of her own grief was just something I couldn't, I was almost struck dumb by it when I visited, that first summer. And I realized how very powerful food was. And because so the book, there's technically 3 languages in the book: English, obviously, and then there's Italian, and then there's Sicilian. And my mother-in-law really don't have a common, we share Italian together, but it's neither of our mother tongues. Sicilian is her mother tongue, English is my mother tongue, but we both can communicate in Italian. And so sitting at her table, there was no language needed, right? It's just, she would make these beautiful, delicious, gorgeous meals and sort of say, here, this is what I have to give you. I don't have a lot to give you in the way of, financial thing. I can't ease your very broken heart and my granddaughter's very broken heart and my own, but we can do this together. We can eat together. And so that becomes really, those scenes, those moments become very central in the book to anchoring the heart piece with my mother-in-law. And food is big there. So it's both 2 things. It's one, the fact that Saro was a chef, and so food is going to be central to the book, but then it's also how food becomes this instrument to express all of these other themes in the book.
And again, towards the end of the book, you have some wonderful recipes. I told my husband,
yes, I do.
I want to definitely make these recipes. I'm like, this looks good.
Please do. They're good for parties.
So I definitely have, so my husband, I'm first generation, my husband's first generation, and he comes from a Haitian family. And okay. I think that's where the commonalities I can find commonalities between Sicily and Haiti. It's like it's food.
I'm sure.
Right?
Yep, yep.
And it's good food.
Yep.
My family makes good food too, but it's again, different just slightly different. Married into a Haitian family, and I'm like, okay, when I go to the house, it's like multi-courses. It's like, and it's really,
yes.
It's really good food. I'm like, okay, so I hit the lottery. My husband's not a chef, but my mom-in-law, and my aunt-in-law, they can throw down. They're really good.
And and to your point, I think that that I was very much aware also of that as I was writing the book. Sara and I are, our daughter's in the book, right? And I was very aware of the fact that I wanted to sort of write forward a history for her of not only a time in her life when she was very young, because he passed away when she was 7, but I also wanted to write forward sort of memories of her mother-in-law. I'm sorry, my mother-in-law, her grandmother, so that she will know things. I mean, she'll remember them, but I was very aware that, I'm sort of, she will be seeing those experiences through my lens, effectively, and sort of creating a kind of living document, a love letter also to her grandmother in the book. And the way food was used, right? Because I don't know all those recipes. My mother-in-law doesn't write all of them down. Sometimes I can get a few things out of her, and she'll talk me through something. But what happens often in families is that when that matriarch, or sometimes it can be the patriarch of the family who cooks too. There are some families where it's the dad who does the cooking, but nonetheless, we lose a little bit with each generation, right? And so I'll never be able to make something exactly the way Nonna, my mother-in-law, does. And I wanted to be able to capture what her food has meant to me and to our daughter, and have my daughter know that.
Which I think is important because, just personal experience, is that I think for me, early in my marriage, it was a little intimidating, right? My mom-in-law,
yes,
great cook, and she's like a great mom, and it's kind of like, oh my God, am I going to live up to this? And and my rice and beans, my son, any day will tell you that, grandma's rice and beans, right? I got to have that. And I don't take offense anymore. It's love, right? It's like I'm glad, like you said, like there's that food is a love letter, right?
It's a love letter. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And writing the book made me remember the ways my own grandmother would make things for me as a child that, I don't have some of the recipes for, and I thought, oh, wouldn't it be nice if, I could, understand or, be with her in the kitchen again. And in some ways, writing the book allowed me to sort of access those memories and maybe energetically connect up to all the women in whose kitchens I've stood, right? And who have, made food for me as a way to say, we love you, we care for you, get stronger, let's fortify you. They're not saying that literally, but, that's what they're doing.
Correct. I think the another interesting part in the book, and it's a small piece, but for me it was really important that the cross-cultural perspectives, right? You come from and your daughter multicultural. You're American. Your husband was Italian, and for me, again, my sons, I said, multicultural as well. Parents of West Indian descent. And, and also then acculturating to America, both my husband and I being first generation. And there was this one scene that spoke to me, and I think a lot of kids, especially kids of color, may have this experience, is on page 243 towards the end of the book, where you and your daughter are taking a trip, and then your daughter asks a question, Mommy, why do you think there are no other brown people? And I'm going to mispronounce his name, Alla Manusa.
Alla Manusa.
Oh, see, beautiful Italian. And I think you do such a wonderful job of reflecting on that experience and talking with her and affirming her. And I think that's one thing that I definitely want to do with this podcast, What is Black, is the fact that, again, being being a Black person, being a person of color, is not just this monolithic experience. And I think this book speaks to ways to be who you are. And I just wanted to know, like, what your thoughts were about that experience and how you continue to affirm her, being a woman of color, girl of color, or just a human being.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking that question. Identity definitely is a theme in the book, right? The identity of, even just in Italy, let's say on my husband's side, he's Sicilian. He's Italian to Americans, but when he's in Italy, he's Sicilian. Right? So that changes a bit of his identity, right? For me, I'm American, but here I'm a Black American, but when I go there, I'm more American than Black, but then Black. It's always changing. And I felt like as I was writing the book, and especially for my daughter, who very much has asked me on many different summers when we're in a small Sicilian town of, 600 people now, and we are the only people of color. And, she is a child who's growing up in Los Angeles in a very diverse and large American city with many, many, many different cultures. So for her to go to a place where, people look one way, it's shocking to her. And so, not shocking, she's used to it now, but she often will ask that question, why? I don't understand why there's not different types of people here. And so in that scene in the book that you referred to, she asked that question. She was about 7 or 8 years old. I think she was 8 in that chapter. And, I try to explain to her, one, just, in a historical sort of sense of, how people of color have been flung across the diaspora, if you will, for many different reasons, not the least of which is the slave trade. But without getting into that for an 8-year-old, was just I realized that as a mom in that moment, what she wanted to know was, 1, am I okay? 2, is it okay to be different? And to know that she could claim that place, even though she didn't look like everyone else. Mm-hmm. And so I felt like, and I do feel like my role as a mom is to help her see herself and her value and her humanity in any environment that she finds herself in. And sometimes that's a lot of heavy lifting as a parent to do, of a parent of a child of color. And different situations ask of us to do it in different ways. But in that moment, I think what she was saying, in the absence of her father, who is the connective link between Sicily and America for her, she was saying, do we belong here? I don't think she was consciously thinking that question, but that was sort of, what I at least interpret as to be the question underneath the question. And, and my answer is absolutely we do. And it's a question I've had to ask myself as someone who is, I have dual citizenship. I was born, obviously here in the States, but being married to an Italian and moving in and about 2 worlds and 2 languages. The book is bringing that to the forefront. And when I saw it play out in her, I knew that it was also something that I wanted to pull into the book as well and make that a theme. So it's a long answer, but I do feel that while it's not, a main theme of the book, it is definitely a part of our lived experience, and to not include it would have been not true to, sort of the complexity of the whole situation.
And again, I think, I love the way, you answered the question. And again, coming from a, developmental, I'm not a developmental pediatrician, but I am a pediatrician. Like you, I think you answered it great, right? You have to meet your child where they are. And mm-hmm. I think you did a great job. Great job, Mom.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, no, listen, Mom, being a parent is challenging, and as we all know, and one of the things that, I was reading that scene recently when I had to do the audiobook, and it brought me right back to that day, and I thought, oh my gosh, how very raw we were. I think one of the things about parenting after loss and parenting when you are grieving and parenting a grieving child is that you really realize that you have to be incredibly honest with your child. the world has turned upside down, and the children are become so wise. When they've lost a parent, they sort of know, as I talk about in the book, like the secret trapdoor to life, right? And so they're wise beyond their years. And to not be as honest as we can with them actually erodes trust, the parent-child trust. And so I knew, there are many places in the book where some hard moments happen between us as mom and daughter, because of our lived circumstances. And I kept trying to, in my own way, as best I could, always be as honest as I could with her, even when those answers were unresolved or they hurt or were painful.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you. I mean, I think like you said, you said it correctly. Parenting is hard,
Here it is.
And will forever be emblazoned, in my heart. Yeah, it's hard, no matter what circumstances, right?
Absolutely,
you had some very trying circumstances. But you did it together. And like you said, that matrix of love, your family, and that support, I think was very evident to the evolution of your relationship and through your grieving process.
Thank you.
So far, I think we've touched on all, different facets of your career, and I wanted to kind of circle back to this new role of writer. And and doing the research for the book, I looked on your website, and there's one. I mean, everything was great on the website, but I think there's this one phrase that you wrote that like really struck me. So I wrote down the quote. It says, "I believe we are all made stronger through sharing our stories, and I have I have to know firsthand that these stories record not only where we have been, but that they can inspire where we are headed." And so my question for you as a writer was, how has writing this book helped inspire where you're headed?
Wow, that's a great question. Thank you. I do believe, I come from a family of people who like to just sit around and tell stories, after dinner or, at a holiday. So I've always been around the oral storytelling tradition. So, and I guess as a kid, I could even see how people would include their past, to tell a story about the present. They would have to reach back and touch. I said, well, let me tell you this first, well, let me go back but you have to know this. And so in that way, they're constantly sort of clocking where they are in present time by helping you to see where they were. So I kind of, and memoir, of course, which is my book is a memoir, requires that of the writer, right? And so I was constantly looking at where I was and where I had been. But as I got to the end of the book, I realized that I was being able to, writing the book was affording me an opportunity to, one, reflect in such a way as to then, and to heal in such a way that I could think of where do I want to go next? What do I want from my life? And one of the things about losing a partner or anyone that we love dearly, a sibling, a best friend, a parent, is that we began to really see the preciousness of life. And I'm very aware of, my time, right? My time on the planet. I know it's not, we all know it's not forever, but I really know it's not forever, And so as I was writing the book, I started to think about, I was asking myself, one of the reasons even to write the book was sort of saying, I really want, in order to go forward, I feel like I need to get this story out. I need to share the story. I think there's something that I will feel another kind of loss if I don't write the story. And I'm a creative person, and obviously as my career in the arts as an actor, but writing was, I just felt like if I don't at least try to do this, I'll suffer another kind of loss. So when I got to the end of writing the book, and which is a process we can have a whole other podcast on, but I really could see the strength that I had gathered over not only the years of living it, but then the 2 years I spent writing the book. And so I really feel like the book, writing the book and telling my story has given me an opportunity to sort of strengthen my sense of my own power or potency in the world. And I don't mean, necessarily even what I do with it, but just the sense of like, I feel more, I feel stronger just as a mom, as a woman, as a person. And I didn't expect that. I didn't expect that as an outcome of writing the book. So it definitely makes me feel more curious about my future and what things I might want to do, because I never imagined I could write a book, and I did. So, there's a kind of excitement and a sense of curiosity that I take into each day of like, oh, wow, what else will life unfold for me? Or how else will life unfold for me? So yeah, I think writing the book has made me definitely see more possibility in my future. I certainly see more than I saw 7 years ago when I was a new widow. At that point, I felt life had closed down on me. And that's loss feels that way often. And so these 7 years have been a reopening, and the book was a big reopening.
And I think others will notice that and get that from reading the book as well. I think, again, this has been such a wonderful opportunity to speak with you, Tembi. Again, the book was wonderful. And I'm not just saying this. I think there were definitely places where, like, I had to break out my tissues, and I was, not letting my husband and son, see me, like, cry again. It's like, oh, this is a book.
Oh my gosh. Well, I hope you also laughed a little too.
Yes, I did. And I will. And I will be stuffed once I try some of the recipes.
Oh, great. Good. Wonderful.
Well, I think I purposely last week, again, just trying to, finish the book in preparation for the podcast episode. I purposely said, let's go to an Italian restaurant. It wasn't, Sicilian food, but like, okay, like I'm trying to get into the feel. Feel of the
absolutely. Oh, that's one. That's one. Anytime that a book or a movie or music, anything can inspire us to sort of sit around the table together and all be together, I think it's a good thing. Because we move in such a fast-paced world that when we slow down and enjoy some of the most basic gifts of life, which is food is both a natural gift, but there are many places in the world where it's a scarcity also. So it's a privilege to be able to be in company and to have a well-balanced and beautiful meal, and to not take that for granted.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Tembi.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure being with you. Thank you.
Pleasure as well. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to What is Black Podcast. As always, we'd love to hear from you. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Also, you can find us on most apps that you listen to podcasts. We're on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify. So tell a friend, and we look forward to hearing from you.